Children huddle on bare earth in the shadow of barbed wire fences, scorched grass beneath boots. A U.S. Marine kneels, stretching out his open palm. It holds a square of chocolate, unwrapped, untouched, absurdly real. It is late June, 1945, on the southern tip of Okinawa. Surrender. This is the story of how the humanity of American soldiers in Okinawa destroyed decades of fear and changed Japanese lives forever. June 1945, southern Okinawa. Masako Yokoyama, eyes swollen from nights of smoke and terror, cradles her daughter as she steps from the darkness of a limestone cave. June 24, 1945. The sun rises behind torn clouds. Each ray cuts through the morning haze that hangs stubbornly over southern Okinawa. From the rim of the shattered valley, smoke still coils, sweet and sharp, drifting from the charred bones of farmhouses. Crows move in black silence, arcs looping above the broken ridge, indifferent to the bodies tangled below. Masako Yokoyama does not look up. Her world has narrowed to the 37 steps that snake out from the cave's wet mouth behind her. Each footfall is deliberate as she treads over pebbles and splintered roots, her daughter's hand an anchor, her own heart thudding the rhythm of dread. Air tastes of mildew and fear. Her legs feel hollow, balanced by nothing but habit and maternal will. Behind her, shadows flicker, the shapes of other women and children pale in the dawn, pressed together by the memory of whoever last screamed. For 71 days, they have lived as breaths between artillery shells, counting the cracks in limestone, reciting wartime slogans in whispers. They waited for death. They expected brutality. No one speaks. Every scrap of voice spent on pleading with ghosts or shushing a child into stillness. In one shaking hand, Masako holds a cloth-wrapped bundle, a child's ration of half-molded rice, pressed close enough for warmth. In the other, she grips Megumi's fingers, small, bird-thin, still sticky with cave dust. The girl's lips are cracked. God knows how much longer she would have lasted. At the cave entrance, a new sound. Boots crushing debris. Commands barked in a language none of the women understand, harsh and sharp, nothing like the shrill dialects of home. Rifles glint in slanted morning sun, barrels held at a low, uncertain angle. Megumi's breath catches. Masako's knuckles whiten. Each legend, each warning told by officers and school teachers parades through her mind. Americans are beasts, the teachers had said. They will tear you apart. The devils eat babies. Never be captured. Better to die with honor. Now the devils stand 10 paces away. They are taller than she imagined, helmeted, faces unreadable under the shadows of brims. Their uniforms are dirty, but no blood, no wild eyes. Just dirt, fatigue, and something else. Nervousness. Or pity. Masako hears her own heartbeat. The world shrinks. Stone, grass, the hush of wind. Everyone braced, waiting for execution. Then, movement. One of the Americans, a young Marine with sunburn pinking his neck, lowers his rifle. He steps forward slowly. The others watch, tensely, but not with anger. He fumbles in a pocket, pulls out a bar. Brown paper wrapper, one corner torn. Chocolate. He holds it toward Megumi, palm up, arm outstretched over the wire. His other hand opens, a silent, empty gesture. No commands, no violence. Masako blinks. Sweat rolls down her temple. Behind her, a murmur spreads. Children's eyes widen. The Marine's face, she realizes, is hurting, creases torn by what she later thinks is regret. The chocolate bar sits there, ordinary and impossible. On the hill, another soldier crouches and opens something else, a metal can. He spoons pale fruit onto a tin plate and places it carefully at the base of the wire. A nurse, her Red Cross armband muddied, hurries forward with a roll of white bandages. She kneels before a limping boy, glances at Masako, then nods as if to say, "It's all right." Her hands are gentle. The boy stares at her, terrified, but when the nurse rubs antibiotic ointment onto his leg, He flinches at the cold, not at violence. A crow caws. A U.S. officer barks orders. Within minutes, the soldiers carry out cartons, water, rations, small tins with faded American labels. They call to the villagers, gestures huge, voices slow. Chocolate and chewing gum appear in children's hands like fragments from a vanished world. Laughter bubble up, timid at first, then confused and shrill as candy passes from foreign palms to starving tongues. Masako looks skyward. This valley, which the imperial teachers had filled with horror for 7 years, now brims with things unspeakable in their ordinariness: food, medicine, strangers who do not kill. Her daughter chews, stares. The taste is too sweet. Her hand stops shaking. A nurse presses a bandage into Masako's palm. Their eyes meet. "You are safe now," the woman says, slowly enunciating. The words mean nothing. It is the gentle firmness that carries the message. Masako collapses, not from violence, but from the collapse of fear. For the first time since the bombs started falling, she does not know what comes next. 100 meters across the open field, U.S. logisticians form a human chain from truck to tent. Canvas shelters unfold in the morning wind, olive drab, stark against the wasted landscape. Masako blinks away tears and smoke. In her peripheral vision, a Marine with a faded tattoo drags a crate labeled in block English, "Medical Supplies, Pacific Command," and all around them, the false wall separating victors and vanquished, Americans and Okinawans, begins to crumble. For most of her life, Masako had known only one truth. From the first days of the Pacific War, the Empire's voice had been everywhere: radios blaring in classrooms, pamphlets tucked under rice bowls, posters screaming in red and black from every intersection in Naha and Shuri. Americans, the word had been hammered into fearful shapes: savages, baby killers, the destroyers of Nanking and Manila. Tales multiplied of islanders forced into mass suicide, of brutal mutilations, of a hunger so profound it warped both body and mind. The end would come, certain and pitiless, if the enemy ever landed. The reality, written in sweat and dirt on this battered island, had been worse than rumor. In the spring and summer of 1945, Okinawa became a landscape of chaos. The Imperial Japanese Army, desperate to slow General Simon Bolivar Buckner's advance, conscripted civilians as porters, human shields, even suicide attackers. For months, the thunder of American guns, first from warships, then from Sherman tanks and 8-inch howitzers, never ceased. The bombardment, Masako remembered, was like having the sky itself torn open. By early May, entire villages had vanished. Banana groves and tangerine orchards scorched to ash. Official reports, carefully written on rice paper and ferried by girls no older than Megumi, claimed victory was near. But everyone in the caves knew the truth was bleeding out, hour by hour. Numbers mattered here. More than 180,000 civilians, nearly 2 out of every 3 Okinawans at the start of the year, were trapped in the southern pocket, flushed from holes, living on roots and prayer. At least 90,000 children were among them. Within weeks, potable water was gone. Firewood and kerosene became worth a soldier's life. Disease, malaria, dysentery, ringworm, blossomed in the mud. Masako had seen friends barter earrings for dried radish, watched relatives carried out feet first. American troops came ashore in April, their boots sinking into carved coral beaches. They advanced, mile after mile, day after day, over ridgelines so chewed by battle that the maps issued to the 6th Marine Division crumbled to confetti in the rain. For 90 days, the fighting never let up. The echoes of artillery, the metallic stink of cordite and flesh, these became constants. But what none of the imperial proclamations had said, what every newspaper failed to print, was this: Americans came with more than ammunition. Their landing craft disgorged not only mortars and tanks, but entire fleets of trucks filled with crates. Letters home, written in slanted script and blurred by sweat, described kits of kindness, rations, bandages, baby formula. It was not easy to trust. Every rustle of grass, every cough from the next cave still threatened an ending. Stories of executions and torture were not easily dismissed by the taste of tinned peaches or the press of a bandage. Fear was muscle deep, trained by years of discipline. Yet the American camp, set up in Nakagusuku and Itoman behind makeshift lines, worked in an order that seemed almost miraculous. Within 3 days of the last shells, new signs appeared in both English and clumsy Japanese. Safe area, food, no harm. Marines, young, old, Southern, Midwestern, rotated in and out of the perimeter. Commanders ordered their men to collect all chocolate and preserved tins for distribution. One evening, as dusk painted the sky orange over the assembly area, a column of Okinawan mothers shuffled forward for the evening meal. At the head of the line, Masako found herself in front of a stocky Marine with a face weathered by cigarette smoke and nights without sleep. He set down a tin and pointed to her child. "Eat," he said, then softer, unsure. "Please." Masako tried not to flinch. She watched him break open a crate, a gift for her, for the child, from a world she could barely comprehend. A can of condensed milk, a bar of soap, a folded leaflet in 3 languages. "For your health." He did not touch her. He did not even step forward. Instead, the man placed the items on the ground and stepped back, unwilling to cross the boundary between them. All around, similar scenes played out. A Navy corpsman stitched a wound on a woman's foot. A Red Cross volunteer distributed towels. Soldiers fixed a broken well pump, working without weapons in hands. There were numbers, too, for history's record. By July, official figures logged more than 75,000 civilians under the direct care of the military government. 12 emergency medical clinics staffed with Army and Navy doctors operated day and night, treating wounds, pulling teeth, and delivering babies. 242 children were born in the first month after the surrender. By the end of summer, American records detailed shipments on yellow paper, 1,800 tons of rice, 300,000 cans of preserved food, 35,000 pairs of shoes. Each figure careful, deliberate, laid over the chaos as a promise, a ledger of something like accountability. For Masako, indeed for every mother, numbers took on different meanings. When she looked at her daughter, licking the last sweet crumbs of chocolate from her palm, she counted not pounds or gallons, but days. How many days since the cave? How many days since hope? The world outside the American lines remained ruined, villages razed, fields burned, but inside time began to reset. Tents filled with singing. Children's laughter mingled with the drone of generators. The Americans, weary and haunted themselves, became both jailers and saviors. Some perhaps just as afraid of what the new peace demanded as the Okinawans they now fed. Masako witnessed things she struggled to name. At night, she pressed her ear to the canvas of her new shelter and listened, not for bombs or commands, but for the sounds of ordinary life, reborn. A Marine quietly reading a letter by flashlight. An Okinawan boy, his arm in a sling, trying out English words from a dog-eared notebook. The wail of an infant promptly answered by a stranger's lullaby. The melody foreign, the comfort not. What every woman in that camp saw next would never leave her. It was the 5th morning since the cave. Megumi, face washed for the first time in weeks, traced her fingers over a scrap of American parachute fabric, white nylon uncertainly soft. Around her, the assembly center came alive with unfamiliar routines. The clatter of ration tins onto wooden tables, soldiers unpacking stacks of K-rations, cheese, crackers, a sealed pack of chewing gum. Each label, a mystery. Hands trembled as the first ration can hissed open. The smell, salt, meat, something almost rich, filled the air. Masako's eyes stung. Her instinct, rehearsed through starvation, was to take, hide, hoard. But the Marine only smiled, then passed the can across the table. 2 more soldiers followed, each contributing their own dinners. The children watched, unblinking, as candy bars and powdered chocolate appeared. No one had ever seen such colors before. Masako exchanged glances with another mother, Akiko, whose son gripped a tin spoon with white, crooked knuckles. The women whispered, Voices nodded with disbelief. Would kindness, freely given, demand a price tomorrow? A sudden noise, a crate falling echoing like a shot, made everyone flinch. One mother wept quietly, convinced punishment was coming. But the Americans only hurried to help. For the first time in months, the tears were not of fear. He expected brutality. What he found was a warm meal. By July, the routines of assembly camp life took uneasy root. Each sunrise brought new deliveries from American trucks. Field stoves hissed, their blue flames making rice porridge for hundreds. A U.S. Army medic, Sergeant Thomas Walker, moved down the rows of cots, checking bandages, offering half-spoken reassurances. A girl, barely 8, found herself the recipient of a pair of boots. U.S. Army issue, shined with nervous pride by a private from Ohio. Her mother held her breath. From nowhere, in this place of absence, a soldier produced a comb, a bar of scented soap. For you. Yours. The girl's voice caught. She nearly dropped the comb. The camp dwellers began to notice. The Americans rationed their own food, sometimes skipping meals so children could eat. One night, Masako spied a Marine handing his only candy bar to a crying toddler. It was a Hershey's. Numbers became currency, 10 cans for one smile, 100 pieces of gum for an hour of peace. Yet the shadows of past indoctrination clung fiercely. In her dreams, Masako still heard the officers' lectures. Never trust them. Death before dishonor. She whispered old prayers, afraid of what kindness might cost. A group of elders debated, huddled in the dusk. What if these gifts, food, medicine, shelter, were a trap? What if tomorrow the Americans tired of playing savior? Everyone measured generosity against the memory of violence. The ruined village north of the valley, the fields where bodies were stacked like cordwood, the hospital that vanished in 2 nights. One old man, his eyes rheumy, spat out, "They want us weak, grateful, dependent. Remember the emperor." But more and more, the evidence weighed against old fears. A Navy doctor delivered a baby at dawn, holding the newborn with an awe that made even skeptics weep. But the next thing Masako saw in the clinic would shatter every remaining barrier. Okinawan social fabric, shredded by months of carnage, began slowly to knit itself anew around the assembly centers. Small routines, learning English phrases, trading stories, discovering names, offered stability. Yet within mothers and elders, the battle of trust raged. A teenage boy, Yasushi, watched an American chaplain fix his shattered glasses. The chaplain's hands shook, the boy's breath caught. When he returned the glasses, whole for the first time in weeks, Yasushi bowed, unable to speak. Masako tried to rationalize the daily acts of aid. These are soldiers. They are trained for war. Pity is weakness. But every day, contradiction grew. Americans scoured hills for survivors. U.S. medics risked ambush to pull wounded from collapsed tunnels. Sergeant Walker stitched wounds, sweat gleaming on his brow, never asking names or affiliations. An epidemic flared. Typhus swept through one camp. Instead of abandoning the sick, American doctors instituted strict quarantines, new beds, clean sheets, and soup for those most afflicted. The act seemed senseless when measured against the portrait painted by imperial propaganda. Akiko confessed to Masako, "I thought they would kill my boy. Instead, they cured him. I cannot understand." But misunderstanding for many was the only protection left. What would happen when the Americans went home, August 10, 1945? A rainstorm pounds through the canvas camp. Masako runs from shelter to shelter searching for Megumi. The assembly area floods. Brown water swirls past the tents. Screams punctuate the night. Someone is injured near the medical clinic. She finds Megumi sprawled on wet gravel, her leg badly cut on exposed wire. Blood soaks her skirt. The wound is terrible. A U.S. nurse, Lieutenant Ellen Parker, rushes over, kneels. Rain streams from her cap as she tears open a sterile pack, binding the wound tight. Hands shaking, Masako pleads, "Will she be—" Ellen snaps, I won't let her lose the leg. Megumi sobs. American medics crowd around, working swiftly as thunder cracks overhead. Ellen's voice cracks in the chaos. I promise you, she'll walk. Lightning flashes. Masako sees the nurse's eyes, red, determined. A U.S. Army doctor hands Masako a cup of sugar water. For shock, Masako clings to Megumi as the minutes drag, every sense sharp, her heart thudding. A dialogue passes between Ellen and Dr. Chen, the attending surgeon. She could die, Chen mutters. Ellen answers, not if we treat her as family. That's our mission now. Megumi's foot flinches as anesthesia bites. Time dilates. Rain muffles all sound except for voices and Megumi's muted cries. Chen works, hands swift. Finally, she's safe. She'll walk. In the aftermath, Chen sits beside Masako. Sometimes you have to choose, mercy or memory. We were enemies an hour ago. Now we're just parents. If this story moved you the way it moved Masako and Megumi, a like shows you believe in the power of true history. Now, let's continue. Silence. Thunder fades. But what happened after that storm would leave its mark on two families forever. In the waning weeks of summer, the routines of rescue gave way to quieter forms of care. Each sunrise forced Masako and the other mothers to catalog the new world outside war's shadow, swollen rice fields drying in the sun, rows of canvas tents shrinking as Americans packed gear for departure, the hum of children learning English from dog-eared pamphlets. For Megumi, the bandage on her leg became a badge, a reminder not just of pain but of survival and unexpected grace. Lieutenant Parker visited daily, checking for infection, teaching her how to walk again. When Megumi stumbled, Parker steadied her silently, nodding encouragement. A packet of photographs passed among the mothers, grainy black and white prints showing medics and Marines beside grinning children. The mothers stared, hands trembling. Was this evidence or a new kind of memory? Masako hid one in her sleeve, afraid someone might claim it as contraband. Over meals of boiled rice and canned fruit, old worries loosened their grip. Conversations drifted to plans, a new roof, a returned husband, a school rebuilt. Masako confided to Akiko, I am still afraid, but it gets quieter inside. Akiko smiled, counting the days since she last hid food. A U.S. Army chaplain taught children the Star-Spangled Banner, but offered to learn traditional Okinawan songs in return. For one astonishing afternoon, American and Okinawan voices mingled, sweet and clumsy, rising above the ruins. The transformation was not gentle. Some elders held out, muttering about spies and betrayal. A few denounced those who fraternized, warning the enemy never changes. One evening, an old woman discovered her daughter learning English words for friendship and cried bitterly, convinced the family's soul was being lost. Sergeant Walker watched two mothers argue, one holding a can of peaches, the other waving away help. He left the can in the dust between them, a silent offering. The next morning it was gone. But the letters Masako would write years later proved how deep those changes would go. 20 years after the battle, Masako, settled in Naha, mother of 4, sat for an interview with a historian. Her English was careful, her memories sharper than expected. They said you would kill us, she told the recorder. I thought my child would die. But the American nurse, she became my memory. When I hear thunder, I remember her hands, not the guns. Another mother, Akiko, recalled the taste of American food. I still dream of chocolate. When I first tasted it, I was afraid. Now it makes me remember kindness. Documented numbers now etched in official archives confirmed what the women always knew: 26,000 pounds of food distributed in 3 months. Nearly 8,000 civilians treated by American medical teams. Hundreds of babies delivered by hands that, according to old stories, should have brought only death. A photograph appeared in a history textbook. Masako, Megumi, and Parker. 3 women, 2 nations joined for a heartbeat of mercy. Masako's hands rest on Parker's shoulder, heads bowed together. Years after the surrender, American veterans wrote letters to their Okinawan friends. Lieutenant Parker sent Megumi a birthday card from Illinois every May. Megumi, now grown, kept them in a lacquered box, proof that pain could be answered, not just survived. If forgiveness was possible here, perhaps no war need ever end in silence. As Okinawa rebuilt, the memories of those summer months lingered. Assembly center tents became schoolrooms, then market stalls. The Americans moved on, but each family counted the passage of time by a different calendar. Before chocolate, after chocolate. Every anniversary of the battle, survivors met to remember both the dead and the living. On one rainy morning in June, Masako placed a candy bar on a child's grave, her own ritual for a world reborn. Historians debated. Was this mercy unique to Okinawa? Did defeat or compassion shape the fate of thousands? The only truth, Masako thought, was locked in the eyes of her daughter, when kindness appeared where death was promised. The aftermath. Living with change. No transformation is easy. For some mothers, suspicion lingered. For others, gratitude reshaped their understanding of humanity. The voice of history, colored by numbers and names, could not erase the sting and salvation mixed together in memory. In the market years later, Megumi met an American visitor. He greeted her by name, offered her a stick of gum, arm trembling with age. She smiled, and both remembered, without words, the price of every small kindness. But for Okinawa, the real legacy of the battle was not victory or surrender, but the choice to remember, both fear and mercy. June 1945, southern Okinawa. The memory remains sharp as sunlight through torn canvas, children huddled on bare earth, a Marine's hand offering chocolate. Masako, eyes hollowed by weeks underground, stepping into the day with her daughter. Time winds forward, years bleeding into decades. The assembly center tents are long gone, their canvas sold for market stalls or patched into school roofs. Generations have grown up in the aftermath, remembering famine, then mercy. Masako wonders now, was it luck, madness, or a miracle that shifted history in that valley? Her hands trace the edges of faded photographs, herself, Megumi, Lieutenant Parker, faces pressed together in a moment of rest. In the sticky heat of a summer anniversary, survivors gather at what's left of the old camp. Masako stands, gray-haired now, her granddaughter at her side. She lays a chocolate bar on a stone marker, her silent tribute. A Marine veteran from Illinois, stoop-backed and careful, joins her with American gum. They share a quiet pause, old enemies, old fears, digested if not erased. The air hums with insects, laughter, distant songs. Masako's granddaughter snaps a photo, 3 generations crowded together, the taste of sweet candy lingering on her tongue. The ghosts of war come not as monsters, but as reminders. The kindnesses, small and strange, free the living from chains handed down in terror. She does not forget the shouts, the starvation, the children lost in caves. But she chooses, every year, to remember a shaking hand with a chocolate bar. Megumi, grown now with her own child, whispers, "You were afraid." Masako answers, "So were they." Silence. "Did you forgive?" "Not always, but I remembered who helped us walk again." At the edge of the field, Masako meets Sergeant Walker's son, himself now deployed in a distant land. He asks, "Does mercy really last?" "Mubbed?" Masako replies, "Only if we keep feeding it." The world measures suffering in numbers, pounds of rice, gallons of tears, years between peace. Okinawa's wound healed not by forgetting, but by transforming memory with each act of kindness. The transition from propaganda to truth happened not in grand speeches, but in whispered dialogue and ordinary gifts, a spoon, a bandage, a song. On the horizon, the ruins blur into new roads. Okinawans still argue, still mourn, still rebuild. What happened in that valley in that summer ripples outward, in every mother who dares to trust, in every soldier who sets aside old orders, in every child who tastes sweetness where only ash was promised. The story lingers. not as a tale of conquest, but as the stubborn unfolding of mercy, an answer to terror, generation after generation, wherever war and peace collide. Subscribe so you never miss the next forgotten story. One the textbooks left behind, but the families remember.